All right. We have a debate that we got to get to here because in our top 10, I have James Franklin at number 2. And at number 3, I have Dan Lanning at Oregon.
Oh, shit, man. I can't make a graphic without a spelling error. Holy crap.
Dan Lanning is your number 2 with James Franklin being at number 3. I'm assuming that we'll have this conversation here. Let's have it.
I can't put James Franklin over Dan Lanning after Dan Lanning just beat him in the Big Ten championship game. The whole argument against James Franklin is his inability to succeed in games against top teams. His record against top 25 teams, especially if we dig in even further to how he performs against the likes of Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, it's abysmal. It was depicted perfectly by their college football playoff run. We talked about how easy of a path they had. They got to play SMU, that was a G5 team that just moved up, and they got to go up against Boise State, the G5 team that was in the playoff. They played Notre Dame. They had the lead. They blew the lead. They blew a game that they should have won. And it all comes back to the same argument over and over and over again with James Franklin. He can't win the big matchups. Now, I know you're going to come back at me here by bringing up that Dan Lanning also doesn't win the big games, but he has been a head coach for a much shorter period of time. He has already won a Big Ten championship, a conference championship in his 3rd year as a head coach, and his worst season in his first season was 10-3. So I give Lanning credit. The way that he has picked up and taken Oregon to a different level, that they were this good this year, I think deserves to give him credit over what Franklin's done in the longer period of time.
All right. So I've been thinking about this all day. I don't know how to attack this, okay? Because I don't have a problem with Dan Lanning being at number 2. Because ultimately, what did I text you about this? It really is for me, 2A, 2B. I don't care. So in reference to having the debate or argument, for the sake of having a debate, let's have one. Joe, I mean, you're about to go on year 5 if they have another season where they win 10 games where he's had more than 10 wins. And I understand that Dan Lanning has done it in a smaller period. You can't ignore what he's done. James Franklin's got a Big Ten title, and you could even – I thought you were going to come in here and say, well, Blake, they beat him on the field, which then I don't have an argument. Joe, I just think it's the consistency level, and I think it's mainly due to the fact, okay, that we have been in a situation where neither one of them, okay, other than once so far, has gone against Ohio State and won. I mean, James Franklin has got 1 win. Dan Lanning's got 1 win. And I think for me, I don't know what to make of Dan Lanning right now in reference to where do I put him on this list? How do I put him? I think he's a top 10 head coach. I think he's a top 8 head coach in college football. But I for me with James Franklin, I understand everybody saying he can't win the big one. I get it. Like, I legitimately get it. He can't. I just don't know how I ding the consistency that he's had over this long period of time. And I think for me, I try to do, Joe, every 4 years, right? Like, what has been their 4-year window as a head coach? Mm-hmm. He's averaging 10 wins a season. He's averaging going 10-2 every year. Like, okay. I mean, like, if that is me, like, fighting over the semantics, let me say this about Dan Lanning. I want to make this very well clear. I think a year from now today, when you and I do this, Dan Lanning will be at number 2 for me because I don't think James gets over that hump. But I just don't know if everything being told right now, I'm not going to just look into the future about my opinion that could be wrong. If I'm just looking at right now, I just got to stay with the consistency. And listen, what happens with a lot of players coming back at Penn State if James Franklin goes on and wins a big one? Like, those are the things that, like, we can play the what-if game down the road, but as at the current moment, the actions, 4 years, Joe, of 10 wins, I don't – it's just having the whole other season for me that won out the day. Again, like I texted you, 2A, 2B. In reference to Dan Lanning, here's the sentence I'll give you. I think he's the best up-and-coming head coach in the country. I don't think that it is I hate using this when people say remotely close. Name another.
No, there's nobody that's in his same bracket of how long he's been a head coach for. No, there's nobody else that competes with him.
The way that he recruits, the way that they're on field, everything that they do, it is on par. I don't know, Joe. I mean, I'm kind of talking myself in and out of it all in the same breath of James Franklin and Dan Lanning, if I'm being honest.
All right, so I've got two things. One, this is one of the few instances that you're saying something that I disagree with, but I can't knock the argument because you're right. James Franklin has been incredibly consistent, 125 and 57 in his time as a head coach. Even when he was back at Vanderbilt, he has been super, super consistent. But I have to look past that, though. Like, that's worthy of you being the third coach on this list. He's one of the best coaches in the country. But he's not in the upper elite category. He's not somebody that I would consider to be a top 4 coach in the country.
Okay.
Just because you're winning a bunch of wins, wait one second. Just because you're winning a bunch of games against the middle of the conference, against a bunch of teams that you're supposed to beat, but you can't beat any of the top programs. He had the opportunity twice this year. We talked about this. I said this year was the year that they get over the hump and that they beat Ohio State. And they had every reason to beat Ohio State, and they couldn't get the job done.
Yeah.
So many chances where we're thinking, man, this is going to be it, and he can't get it done. Let me pitch this to you, though. This is like complete opposite direction of what we just talked about. If James Franklin goes on to win a national championship this year, because a lot of people, they're saying that he did the Ohio State thing. He did the Michigan thing where he brought back his key players, incentivized them to come back, had some nice portal pieces.
They're going to be in my top 2, by the way, going into preseason.
Mm-hmm. If they're able to get the job done, they win a national title. Could James Franklin pass Ryan Day for the number 1 spot in the conference?
No, because of the head-to-head.
Okay, that's a fair answer.
Yeah, no, I mean – like, I don't think, like, for example, if Sharon Moore were James Franklin right now and Sharon Moore won it this year, let's just flip the roles here. And Sharon Moore is 2-0 against him. Like, it's the whole thing, like, you can project. Like, let me give you a scenario here. Early in my career, we had a conversation about Kirby Smart and Ed Orgeron. It was like 2018, okay? And I'm like, listen, I get what you're saying. I do think Kirby will one day overtake him because I think he's baby Nick Saban. But at the same time, and I think the same about Dan Lanning for what it's worth. Okay. But the conversation is there's not like you would have to bring different layers into these conversations because James Franklin is what 0-4 against 0-4 against Ryan Day or 0-5, whatever it is. Maybe he has the only win he has against Ohio State is against Urban Meyer and the boys. I couldn't do it. Now, if there's a scenario where Ryan Day loses 6 games, I mean, maybe we can have a debate, but I mean, goodness great, that's not going to happen. So no, but here's the thing that I'd say that also I want to throw in there. I know James has done it for a long time. Brother, he won 9 games at Vandy. So I get that it's such a long time ago and so much other things have happened. I mean, Joe, they have not been the same since he left. I mean, and
that deserves recognition that he turned a historically awful program into a winner for a brief period of time. I'm all with you there that he needs love for how good Vanderbilt was, and that kind of paints the picture of what he is as a program builder. But it's just though that, and this is something that I think us as media members, when we debate coaches and fans when they debate coaches, that it's forgotten that there is a separation between somebody who's a program builder and somebody who's a national championship winner. He rebuilt Penn State after the whole Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky situation. I know Bill O'Brien was there for a little bit, but the real builder of this program was James Franklin. It was all him that got them to this point. There are just some coaches, though, that can't get past that. There's some coaches that just can't actually deliver in the premier big-time moments because the inch of separation between the top coaches and these middle-tier coaches, it's that just extra instinct. It's that extra drive in knowing how to lock in and find success in tight games that I don't think that he has.
Well, and listen, for what it's worth, The dude literally. Here's also what I know about James Franklin. The coaches love him. Coaches around the country love him. Listen, Jim Knowles doesn't go there if he doesn't like him. Money aside, money was going to be money anywhere he went. He's brought in Manny Diaz. He brought in Tom Allen. He got Andy Kotelnicki. You literally had a weekly segment between Nick Saban and James Franklin. Brother, Nick don't do that with coaches. You mean to tell me in Nick's retirement during the week that he's going to have a conversation, an hour-long conversation on the air with somebody, and he chooses James Franklin? Why? Again, that means nothing about on-field stuff, but I just think, look, 2A, 2B. Now, again, like I said, just so Oregon fans don't come to Louisiana and try to hunt me down, I think Dan's going to pass him up. But at the current moment, for me, I'm just going to leave it there because, Joe, I'm going to tell you, I do think that they're going to be a very big contender this year. I do. I hope Drew Aller takes the next step for him, but look, man, they're going to be a really good team. We didn't talk a lot on Dan Lanning here. Do we need to add anything on Dan Lanning?
Just to reiterate, though, the fact that the trajectory of where he's taken Oregon, because it needs to be recognized. And I know a lot of people want to say, well, Chip Kelly got them to a national championship game. It's so amazing. That those Chip Kelly teams were awesome, but we didn't have this same feeling, right? We didn't have this same feeling that, this team is building towards winning a national championship. That Chip Kelly quality team that they had was unique. It was dynamic, but they weren't recruiting 5 stars like this. They weren't bringing in big defensive linemen that are some of the best in the recruiting class in the country the way that Dan Lanning is.
Well, and I will add this. Again, there's always that one coach from big coaching trees that prevails. I think this is Kirby's. It just happened a little bit sooner than when it did with Nick and them. But, he's going on the blueprint. They recruit at a religious level. The thing that I would say about Dan, okay, you're going into year 4, regardless of how young you are as a head coach, with big-time recruiting comes big-time responsibility. Now, let me just throw this out there to you. This is going to be the 5th top 5 class that he's had. At some point, you can't just point at talent. He's got to get over that hump. Joe.
Wait, Lanning's 5th class?
Yes.
He's been there for 5 years.
Yes, because he's going into year 4. He inherits a class when he goes in there. So if a coach is going into the year, for example, Brian Kelly came in 2022, but he technically had the 2023 class. Does that make sense?
Sure.
He's inheriting a class.
I understand what you're saying. You're saying that he's had a lot of talent. He's recruited well, so now he's got
regardless of the numbers, okay. Right? So even regardless, you've had 4 top 5 classes. With that becomes big. You got to get over that hump now. Because what do we do? Do we do the Ryan Day thing and wait for year 8? And there's a possibility that we do, right? That could very well be a possibility, but. We were having those same questions about Ryan Day, literally this year. So at what point do we take that next step? That is – I love him, though, man. Look, I will say this. Joe, if I were starting a program today, hypothetically, for you – well, let me ask you this. Let's end it like this. Marcus Freeman, Brian Kelly, leave their programs right now. I'm going after Dan Lanning. Who are you going after?
Dan Lanning. Dan Lanning's the answer for that. He's the only answer because he's so young and he's already accomplished so much. He's that next guy that has shown he's transforming. He can transform.
Either he's going to get a massive payday from me or not. Right. He's going to get a massive payday from Nike. He will be. Right. I will make multiple calls to him throughout the week. Dan, crawfish for life. Crawfish.
I don't know if that's going to sell him.
You've never had crawfish, which is
I have not.